it was always a bad sign if a student said something like, well, I've always wanted to be a priest since I was a kid. I determined this is what I want to do. This is the path that I want to take.
I'm sure we have all come across phrases like, he was born to do this, or she was born to do that. And when we actually witness those people in action, there is something almost magnetic about them. They seem to come utterly alive in whatever they are doing. And we find ourselves asking the question, how are they able to do that? But I'm not. The reason such people come alive in what they do is actually quite simple. They have discovered their God-given purpose. They have found their calling, and they have stopped merely existing and started truly living. This is why St. Catherine of Siena says, be who God meant you to be, and you will set the world on fire. That is exactly what Ivanka Trump begins to unpack in the upcoming clip. Let's listen.
I think certain people are just like born to be entertainers, like Elvis, like on stage they come to life.
Yeah.
This is where they're truly happy. I've met guys like that, like great rock stars. Like this is where they feel like they belong. On stage is not just a thing they do, and there's certain aspects they love, certain aspects they don't. No, this is where they're alive. This is where they've always dreamed of being. This is where they want to be forever.
Michael Jackson was like
Michael
that.
Jackson. I saw pictures of you hanging out with Michael Jackson. That was cool.
He came once to a performance. I wanted to be, one moment in time, I wanted to be a professional ballerina.
Okay. Yes. Yes.
And I was, working really hard. I was going to the School of American Ballet. I was dancing at the Lincoln Center in the Nutcracker. I was super serious, 9, 10-year-old. And my parents came to a Christmas performance of the Nutcracker, and my father brought Michael Jackson with him. And everyone was so excited that all the dancers, they wore one glove. But I remember he was so shy. He was so quiet. When you'd see him like in smaller group settings, and then you'd watch him walk onto stage, and it was like a completely different person. Like the vitality that came into him. And you say that's like someone who was born to do what he did. And I think there are a lot of performers like that.
And I just in general love to see people that have found the thing that makes them come alive.
Yeah.
Like I, as I mentioned, went to the jungle recently with Paul Rosley, and he's a guy who just belongs in the jungle.
Yeah.
Like that's a guy where, like when I got a chance to go with him from the city to the jungle, and you just see this person change, of the happiness, the joy he has when he first is able to jump in the water of the Amazon River, and to feel like he's home with the crocodiles and all that, and with he's calling friends, and probably dances around in the trees with the monkeys. So this is where he belongs, and I love seeing that.
You felt that. I mean, I watched the interview you did with him, and you felt that, like his passion and enthusiasm, like it radiated.
Now, as Ivanka Trump highlighted in that clip, no one illustrates the idea of truly coming alive in what they do better than Michael Jackson, widely regarded as one of the greatest entertainers to have ever walked this earth. Most of us know Michael Jackson, the performer, but what many people find surprising is who Michael Jackson was off the stage. Away from the spotlight, he was remarkably shy, deeply introverted, and often uncomfortable in everyday social situations. If you had encountered him in a regular setting, you would have found it almost impossible to believe that this was the same person who could bring an entire stadium to its feet. But the moment he stepped onto that stage, everything changed. The shyness melted away, the hesitation dissolved, and in their place emerged a man who was completely and fully alive, moving with breathtaking precision, performing with raw passion, and connecting with audiences in a way the world had never quite seen before. And this was not merely the observation of those on the outside. Michael Jackson himself confirmed it repeatedly in interviews, making it clear that performing was never something he did for a living. It was something he was. The reason for this is simple, yet it carries profound significance. Michael Jackson was born to be an entertainer. That was his God-given gift, his divine assignment, his calling placed upon his life before he ever took his first breath. Now, here is where this becomes deeply personal for each one of us, because what Michael Jackson experienced on that stage is not meant to be an exception. It is meant to be the norm. It is what God intends for every single human being He has ever created. This is what the Catholic tradition beautifully refers to as vocation, the specific purpose to which God has called each one of us in this world. The Catechism of the Catholic Church is clear. Every single person, without exception, is called by God to a specific occasion. We are not here by accident. We are deliberate masterpieces, carefully crafted by a creator who had a unique mission in mind for each one of us before we were ever formed in the womb. And so this raises one of the most important questions any of us will ever wrestle with. What am I truly born to do in this world? In the next clip, Bishop Barron offers a profound perspective on exactly that. Let's listen.
I go back to my years in seminary formation. So I was a professor for a long time. I was rector for 3 years. When my job was to determine whether these guys were, properly disposed toward the priesthood. Well, I would be part of interviews very often. When I was rector, I interviewed every student as they're coming in, and we'd ask about their vocational call, et cetera. It was always a bad sign if a student said something like, well, I've always wanted to be a priest since I was a kid. I determined this is what I want to do. This is the path that I want to take. Well, okay, but it sounds like you're in charge of your life here. It sounds like you're setting the agenda. You're setting the tone. The right answer when we'd ask someone about their vocation was, I'm feeling called by God to this path. And again, vocation, right? Vocatio, it's a calling. There's someone, listen, outside of your own ego that is summoning you, and very often against your will. There's a resistance to it at first. Watch that all throughout the Bible, from Abraham to Jeremiah and to Peter and Paul. There's a resistance to it. But the call comes from outside. See, because as long as you're in charge, then it's the project of your little ego. And it's going to be far less than God wants it to be. Let me say that again. If your ego is in charge of the project, it will necessarily be less than what God wants. See, God, think of Jesus and the getting into Peter's boat when he says, "Duc in altum," go out into the depths. See, Peter, you've been messing around in the shallows way too long. That's your little ego project, whatever it is. Whatever it is, and no matter how successful it is, if it's your little ego project, it's the shallows. I want you out into the depths. See, so now Peter has to respond to a call beyond his own ego. And so here, this is ancient. The priesthood, no one takes it upon himself. Like, this is my idea. I've been summoned by a higher power.
Now, what Bishop Barron just shared is so critically important to understand, and I say this from personal experience. My own life only began to truly change when I grasped and applied this truth. The foundational principle is this, and I want you to hold on to it. Your life is not about yourself. This is perhaps the single most important thing to understand when it comes to discerning your vocation. It is not primarily about what you want, what you dream of, and what you aspire to achieve. Rather, it is about surrendering yourself and allowing God to do what He wants to do through you. The moment you make that shift from self-directed ambition to God-directed surrender, everything begins to change. This is precisely why Bishop Barron gives us such a striking and sobering example. He says that if a young man walks into a seminary and declares that he has always wanted to become a priest, that he has dreamed of it, planned for it, and aspired to it his whole life, that is actually a very troubling sign. Why? Because it suggests that he's the one in charge. It appears as though he is simply bringing to fruition his own ego, his own script, his own personal drama of what he wants his life to look like. But that is not vocation. That is ambition dressed up in religious clothing. True vocation is something God calls you into, something outside of yourself that speaks to you, redirects you, and claims your life for a purpose greater than your own desires. And when we look at the pages of sacred scripture, this pattern is unmistakable. Not one single person who was called by God did so because it was their personal dream or ambition. Think about Moses, a man who was hiding in the desert, tending sheep when God appeared to him in a burning bush and sent him back to Egypt to liberate an entire people. Moses did not volunteer, he was called. Think of King David, a young shepherd boy whom no one expected, anointed king not by his own seeking, but God's choosing. Think of St. Peter, a simple fisherman who never set out to become the rock upon which the church would be built. Think of St. Paul, a man who was actively persecuting Christians before being stopped in his tracks on the road to Damascus and completely redirected by an encounter with the risen Christ. And so, the single most important thing you must understand when discerning your vocation is this: it begins and ends with God's call. Not your plans, not your preferences, not your ambitions. The question is not, what do I want to do with my life? But rather, Lord, what do you want to do through my life? When you shift from the first question to the second, you stop striving in your own strength, surrendering to a wisdom far greater than your own. But this leads us to the next question. How do we actually hear God's call and recognize it when it comes? Bishop Barron takes us deeper in the next clip, drawing on the powerful story of Bartimaeus, the blind beggar whose encounter with Christ is one of the most vivid illustrations of what it looks like to hear your name called and respond with everything you have. Let's listen.
If the problem in the spiritual order is my ego project is in the lead, in a way, blindness is not an entirely bad thing, because you're not now in control of your life. You are apt to look elsewhere for direction. There's something, in other words, salutary about admitting blindness. As long as, hey, I'm great, I can see fine, my eagle eyes know just where to go, and boop, 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 I'm off. Well, Bartimaeus is blind and he knows it. Good. And he sits by the roadside begging. In command of his life? Hardly. Got everything he needs. No way. He's a blind beggar. So are we all, fellow sinners. So are we all in the spiritual order. We're blind and we're beggars. And so he cries out, hearing it's Jesus of Nazareth. Listen to him. Jesus, Son of David, have pity on me. I think it's so moving that we basically repeat Bartimaeus' cry at every Mass. What he says in the Greek here is, eleison me, eleison me. That sound familiar? Kyrie eleison, Christe eleison, Kyrie eleison. At the beginning of every Mass, we compel everybody at the Mass to enter into the space of Bartimaeus, blind and begging. We don't come into Mass with this kind of blithe confidence that we are in control of our lives. We got our eagle eyes open and we got all the things we need and we're marching along. And boy, isn't it great maybe if Jesus is a wonderful accompaniment to our ego project. No, that ain't going to work. That is not going to work. Rather, we all begin by acknowledging we're like Bartimaeus. Kyrie eleison. Lord, have mercy on me. Have pity on me. I'm not in command. I'm waiting for someone else to take control of my life. Okay, now watch what happens. Many rebuked him, telling him to be silent, but he kept calling out all the more, Son of David, have pity on me. That happens a lot too, doesn't it, in our society? Because boy, do we love people that are in command, people that got it together and they're smart and they're accomplished and they've found their own path. And so if you're a blind beggar, you're saying, I don't really know where I'm going. I'm kind of lost. I'm helpless. I'm a sinner. Well, the society will say, come on, get it together. What's the matter with you? We'll be opposed in the same way Bartimaeus was. But to his great credit, he keeps crying out, Son of David, have pity on me. So then here's the decisive moment. Jesus stopped and said, call him. Now, remember, Jeremiah, it's the Lord will bring the exiles back. Remember the letter to the Hebrews. No one becomes a priest on his own, but is called into that life. So here, Bartimaeus, and therefore all of us, are called by a higher voice. I think maybe I've explained this to you before, but the Greek word ekklesia, which means church, ecclesiastical comes from that. But the root of that is ekkaleo, to call out from, ekkalein. Bartimaeus is being called out of his cramped, blind, helpless life by a higher voice, by a higher power. It's Jesus saying to Peter, right, go into the depths. Same thing. He's being summoned, ekkaleod, into communion with Jesus. That's the church, everybody. It's not a bureaucratic organization. It's a relationship to the one who's called us. Beautiful. He's now being summoned. So they call the blind man saying, take courage, get up. Jesus is calling you. Good. This is the decisive moment. See, do we say yes to it or do we run the other way? That's the question. So Bartimaeus, God bless him, threw aside his cloak, sprang up, and came to Jesus. It's that moment, everybody, when I don't care if you're the president of the United States, I don't care if you're the richest person in the world, I don't care if you realized every one of your stupid little ego dreams. You're a nobody. You're nothing in the spiritual order until Jesus calls you. Now you know who you are. Now you know what to do. Now you know what your life's all about. That's why, beautifully, he throws off his cloak. The scholars tell us that there are baptismal overtones here, which I think is very credible, because in the ancient church, when you were baptized, you took off your street clothes. You stripped down, and then you went down into the water, and then you were clothed in the white garment. You've got a new life now. So Bartimaeus takes off his cloak, his old life, and then beautifully he springs up. Think of this man, blind beggar, crouched by the walls of Jericho, his life kind of going nowhere. But summoned by Jesus, he has this energy. He springs up, comes to Jesus.
Every time I listen to a sermon from Bishop Barron as powerful and beautiful as that one, I find myself wondering what our Catholic parishes would look like if we had more priests preaching with such profound clarity, such conviction, and such depth. What a transformation that would bring to the church. But now let me draw out 3 powerful truths that Bishop Barron pulls from the story of Bartimaeus. These truths that speak directly to each one of us in our journey of discerning our vocation. The first truth is Bartimaeus' blindness. His very name Bartimaeus signals that he is a man who cannot see. He's utterly dependent on others for direction, for guidance, for navigation through life. And this is precisely the posture we must adopt when it comes to discerning our vocation. We cannot see the full picture on our own. We were never meant to. This is why the church has always placed such great importance on spiritual direction, the sacred practice of sitting before a wise, God-attuned guide who can help us see what we cannot see on our own. Just as Bartimaeus needed someone to lead him to Jesus, we too need a spiritual director, someone anchored deeply in God, who can help illuminate the path he is calling us to walk. If you do not yet have a spiritual director, let this be your invitation to seek one. The second truth is Bartimaeus begging. He is sitting on the roadside in complete poverty with no control over his circumstances and no power to change his situation by his own effort. All he can do is cry out for mercy. And far from being a picture of weakness, this is actually the most perfect posture before God. It is the posture of humility, of coming before the Lord with open, empty hands and saying, I cannot figure this out on my own. Lord, have mercy on me. Show me what you want me to do with my life. It is precisely in our poverty, in our surrender, in our letting go that God most powerfully moves. The third truth, and perhaps the most electrifying moment in the entire story, is what happens the moment Jesus calls him. The disciples go tell Bartimaeus and say, take courage, get up, he's calling you. And what does Bartimaeus do? He throws off his cloak and runs towards Jesus. He does not hesitate. He does not negotiate. He does not sit frozen in his blindness and his poverty. He moves with urgency, with courage, with everything he has. And that, dear friends, is the moment of truth for every single one of us. Because Jesus is calling you right now through his very message out of your blindness, out of your begging, and into the fullness of life he created you to live. The question is, what will you do when you hear that call? Will you remain sitting in your limitations, paralyzed by fear and uncertainty, or will you do what Bartimaeus did? Throw off whatever is holding you back and run towards Christ with wholehearted abandon. The cloak is whatever you're clinging to, your fear, your comfort, your own plans. Throw it off. Your God-given purpose is waiting for you on the other side of your surrender. Throw off the cloak and run. I hope this video is helpful. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. God bless you.